Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the hands-on part of the protractors. So before we do anything with the actual protractor, it's definitely worthwhile revisiting circles. So I just quickly cut one out here. And if I have this circle, what I want to just remind students of is, first of all, or let's talk about how many degrees in a circle, how much does it take for me to go all the way around? So if they've been talking about angles already, we would assume that they've had some conversation. But if not, I mean, this is something that we definitely want to make sure that they're into. And then as we do that, before we jump into the protractors, we'll take it upon ourselves to have them fold a circle. So if they have it cut out, we can ask them if 360 degrees was all the way around, how much is half of this going to be? And as I look at where those different pieces are, here we go, our camera's getting good. I can talk about the 180 degrees. I can talk about it being a half circle, all of those pieces. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it one more time. That'll be an important angle for us to have a conversation about. And now I have quarters. And how much would a quarter of 360 be? So again, when we start looking at the protractor, we'll bring this back out again and let them see that that right angle exists in there, right? So it's just to connect those pieces, because we're also going to show them a 360 protractor. Now, not a lot of questions come up with those, but when they get into reflex angles, it's nice if they have a knowledge of how to measure on a 360 protractor, because they are available for sure, and students should be able to use those to measure if they want. Okay, so before, again, we launch into using them, they come in all different kinds of shapes. I'm not going to use this one because the glares on these are, and they're not the easiest for kids to navigate because they haven't got just the protractor. There's so many other things involved, but this is definitely one that they could use. But it also gives them their ruler and their measuring at the same time. We have the half, typical, the half protractor, the 180 protractor is what they call it. And the 180 protractor is just that half circle that we just measured. So we can bring that back and show that to them again. We could even lay it over top and say, how does it look the same, look different if they haven't done anything like that? But again, when we're using this one, we want to point out to them that there's 2 rows of numbers. And I'll just grab a pen for pointing here. One row starts at 0 here and works its way around to the 180. And then the other one starts here and works its way around to the 180. So having said that, how do I know which side I'm going to use? So when we're laying this down on our angle, we're going to decide which is going to be our starting point, and that will determine whether we're going to use this 0 or we're going to use that 0. It's pretty easy to find. The other thing that they need to see is that there's kind of an intersection point right here. That's an important piece for us as well. We need to always keep our eye on that meeting point of the lines that's vertical and horizontal. And the other one would be the 360 protractor. Okay, and again, we would say to them, you know, we've got to notice that there's 2 sets of numbers on here. It starts at 0 and it works its way around, or it starts at 0 here and it works its way around. But what's different about them, and they could lay them side by side, is that I see that I'm not stopping at 180 here. Here's my half circle, I can see it. I'm going to keep going. And as I go around, I start to build on that. So I actually have 360 degrees marked on here. So I see a full circle. Okay. So having said that, let us, and you'll note, I should also point out to you that when you have these full circles, not all of them are like this, but most of them are. When they have a line that's in the center, you'll see that you really got 2 half circles, right? So 2 ways that I can measure. Okay, let's do an angle. So let's have a look at an angle. So in this case, we're going to just start off with the black one. And we'll use the most common one, because these are the ones that mostly show up in the student resource kits and their little geometry sets that they have. So remember, I need that center point. That's always important. And that's going to go at the vertex of my angle. Where the 2 lines cross is the vertex of my angle. So I'm going to put it right in there. And I'm going to make sure that the 0, because my arm is going this way, I'm going to use the 0 on this side. my arm was going to the left, I would use the 0 on this side. So that's how we can tell which one to use. So I'm going to line up that line to 0 right on my line. And they can't be too sloppy. We want them to be really accurate when they get that put in there. And then once I've got it lined up, my corner with my T is here. My line of 0 is right here. I simply need to go up and read off where I'm at. So again, they're going to, well, what line do I read? Remember that we started at the 0. So that's our line that we're going to use to measure. And then they will start to learn the different kinds of angles so that they would know that this couldn't possibly be 100 and some. So we know for sure we're working in here. And when I go across, I'm just going to measure it out, and it turns out to be about, okay, at this point in time, 58 degrees. So I can see that it's just about here at 60, so at 58. Now, some of them are much more accurate, and we'll do one like that in a second. So then I can just solidify for them which scale do I use, which side do I point it on, which way do I go. And then before we leave this, we might say, notice here's our flat line, and we went straight up. When we folded our paper, at what point did we get it to look like it was a corner of this piece right here, right? So that they can start to connect that that quarter fold was 90 degrees. And we'll point that out to them again when we do the circle measurement. Okay, let's do one where I would switch to the left. So a lot of times they say, oh, well, this one's at an angle. It's not like the black one was on top, so I can't do it that way, like it won't work. And I always try to remind students that just because it's on a piece of paper doesn't mean the paper can't move. If you want it flat, then move the paper. If you don't care, we move the protractor. So I'm going to do it so it's not flat so that we do it both ways. I'm going to start this time on this side. So this will be the 0 I'm going to use. X marks the spot. So I'm going to go into the corner. I'm going to line up my black line on my line. And normally they're not quite as thick as it is here. I just made them a little thicker to make it easier for you to see. Okay. And then as I'm going out, because I'm using the outside line this time, we're going to have those individual marks. It'll be a little easier for us to read. So let's have a look. And when I go across, I see that this one is actually 61 degrees. So I can see those counts a little bit easier. It gives me more accuracy. Okay, let's move on. I could do that with the, I'll do it with the circle one too, so that we can see how that works, right? So I'll take the black one because that's easier to see. So I have a marked spot here. It's just not a big X. You don't see dark black lines. And this one's been well used. So it has probably got a few things that have worn off on it as well. Here's my 0 right here. And it's right in line with the plastic where the piece is. So again, I'm going to just line that up. Then when I go around, I'm using this 0 here. And this one's a little more accurate. And I can see that I'm at 56 degrees. So yeah, same as before. Right? So this works the same way. Where I really want to use the circle one is when my angles are larger than 180 degrees. In other words, they go beyond just a flat line. So let's try one like that. Okay. So how do I do it if I don't have a big ruler? Well, there's two ways that we can approach this. One is, let's say that this is what we were asked to measure. We want to know how big, how far did we swing those arms? And we already know that straight across, straight line is 180 degrees. When I go from 0 to a straight line, it's 180 degrees. But this one went way more than a straight line. Here's my straight line right there. So you could do one of two things. You can have the students, if they want to do that with a small one, or that's the only one that they have, there's one way to measure it. And if they're going to measure the outside, the reflex part of it, then they can just lightly draw in a line there so that they can continue that blue line. What we're going to do is we're going to add this part of the angle to this part of the angle. And they don't have to measure this one, but they can if they want, but they see that it's a straight line because we just extended it. So everything that's above here is 180 degrees, Okay, we can just write it down over here. We already know that. This part right here is 180 degrees. Now I want to measure from here to here, and I'm going to add that in. And again, remember, I'm not obliged to leaving my paper the way it is if it's easier for me to move it, so I'm going to move it. I'll use my protractor. I'll line it up in the middle. I'm going to measure because the arm's here. I'm using that 0 right there. Got a bit of a glare there, I see. And my line goes to 51.2. So it's 52. So this little piece in here is 52 degrees. So now I can go back over here and say, I knew that the first part was a straight line. That was 180. The smaller part was 52. So I can add those up and I get 232 degrees. So the entire reflex angle is 232 degrees. So that would absolutely be correct way to do it. There's nothing wrong with that. And for some students, that makes sense to them. They need to see what exactly they're measuring, and that piece works. However, there is another way, and I'm pretty sure that some of you are saying, well, I think I would probably tell them, why don't we measure, I'll use red on this one, why don't we measure this angle here? And then what? That's not the one I wanted. Well, then I would just subtract that from 360. So when I subtract it, 360, take away whatever that angle would be, then I should end up with 232. So if I want to do a double check right now, 232, I subtract it. I'm going to borrow 110, so that'll give me 5. I get 8, 2, 1. So if we're absolutely correct when we measure this, we should be at 128 degrees. Well, let's have a look. Let's see. I'm going to turn it over. I'll use the little one. It doesn't really matter which one you use. My arm's over here, so I'm using the 0 on this side. X marks the spot, and I'm using the outside to measure. And lo and behold, we're at 128. So we're right on the money. So that would be another way that they can do it. And that's the importance of really refreshing their memory about how many degrees in a circle. So this part of the angle is 128 degrees. So a reflex angle can be measured by taking the one you can measure easily and subtracting it from 360. Reflex angle means there's always going to be one that's larger than 180, which means there's always going to be one that's smaller. So the one that's smaller is going to be the easy one to measure. But again, some students love to add the two together. So it's whatever works for them. Okay, so I'm going to just take my circular one too and do the same thing. So if I were to put this one, it's a bit busy now, but that's okay. So let me just get that one in line. Okay. So with the circular one right now, I have this lined up. So there's my 0. So as I'm running around and looking at my value, I see it's 128. So I could do it exactly the same way. Right? That wouldn't make any difference at all. Or I can see that it's 128 from 360. I can just subtract where I'm at, and that would give me the same value, right? The same subtraction that we just did. Wouldn't make any difference. So these are handy little tools. You just don't see them very often because kids don't tend to use them. I want to do one that has multiples on it to make sure that the students are clear. Okay, let's do this one. Okay, so let's measure. This has got multiple angles on it, and I will move it around as we need. But what I want to review is just how we name letters or how we name angles, so that it's really clear that when you have multiple angles on one document, that the students know how to, first of all, write which angle they're measuring, because they can't just say angle O. There's a lot of angle O's here. So O is the common vertex, and I need to be able to say to somebody, is it this angle, or is it this angle, or is it this angle, or is it this angle that I want to work on? And by doing the three-letter naming, that gives that person that direction. So whenever you are naming an angle on multiple pictures like this, we always have three letters, a starting vertex, and it doesn't matter which one you start with. This one to the middle, the vertex sits in the center. So a starting point to the middle vertex to another point. So this one would be angle A, O, and B. And that way I know it's in here that I want to measure. So angle, there's my symbol for angle. It's not quite an L. It's kind of got more of a slant to it. A, O, B. Okay, so let's measure, and I'll use just the round one for this one, for all of them. All right, so I'm going to line it up. I'm lining up to the 0. And I'm going to go up this way. And I can see, I'll grab my pen again. So I should point this out to you that here's 30 on the lower line. That's the one I'm working on. Here's 330, and it still has all of its markings on it. So I can still use that to be accurate. So when I'm going through and I have a look here, I am at 30, almost at 34, so 33 degrees. So we'll say that angle AOB is 33 degrees. I'll put it in here. So now I'm going to ask for angle AOC. A, and I'll bring this down a bit. Here's A, here's O, and here's C. And I'm going to ask students, I'd like it to be the reflex angle. So I'm asking for the big angle. Again, they could measure this angle and add it to 33 degrees. And what? Subtract it from 360. Or because I have my large protractor on here, I'm going to measure this direction. So this time my 0, I'm starting here and I'm going to work my way around, right? Or I can start up here because same thing, there's my 360, it finishes off. I'll use the big one so you can see the lines. So I'm going to start counting around. So I'm starting here, I'm going all the way around. I'm going all the way around up to here. And I'm not quite at 240, but I have passed 235 is right there. There's 236, and I'm right on top of 237. So this big angle all the way around is 237 degrees. Okay, so this big one all the way around was 237. So we could say to some students, well, maybe you could find angle BOC, right? So if they're going to find BOC, well, I'll just adjust my page a little bit. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to use this guy again. I'm going to line up my 0. And just a little bit past 90 degrees, about 91 degrees. Didn't see that one, but that's okay. So now I have this picture here. And I know that this one is 91 degrees. I know that's 33. All the way around here was 237. So now my question would be to students, what is the measure of this angle here? So they could do one of two things. They could measure what this angle is and just tell me what it is. They already know that all the way around here is 237. So if all of this is 237 and all of this is 91 and 33, how could I use those? Is there anything that I can do? Well, sure. I know there's 360 degrees in my circle. Well, assuming that we got there, I think we're a little bit off, but that's our measurement. We are allowed 1 degree of error. Or what else can I do? Well, I could measure this one and subtract that from the total 360 to get this one. So there's lots of possibility. I'm not saying there's one right answer here or one wrong. They already know how big this is. If I measure this one and subtract it from 237, I know that one. If I measure this one and subtract from, I know this one. So what we want them to do is start to be thinking flexibly that I don't necessarily have to measure them all. But it does give me an opportunity then to also check. Does all the way around from one line all the way around to that same starting point give me 360 degrees? Okay, so that's kind of where we wanted to go. Our key point today was just reviewing again how we use a protractor and which side do I use on? Is it 0 here or is it 0 here? And that determines only on where you place it on your angle. So if your angle arm is starting here, then that's your 0. If your angle arm is starting here, that's your 0. And a reminder that in the overview video, I gave you a couple of places that you can go to where the kids can practice. If you just want to see, one of them is virtual, where they maneuver the protractor on the screen and line it up and read it off. They get to type it in and they're allowed a little bit of error before they get a wrong answer. And then the other one is an actual worksheet. Remember, it's not the worksheet piece that we want, it's the actual activity of doing this. So thanks very much, everyone.